POK का मतलब है पाकिस्तान ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीर। तुमने ऑक्यूपाई किया है, मालिक हम हैं। तो जैसे टेररिस्ट की वजह से अगर हम बदतमीजी पे उतर आए तो तुम्हारा हर मोहल्ला IOP बन जाएगा। इंडिया ऑक्यूपाइड पाकिस्तान। जय हिंद।
ये पूछना चाहता हूँ कि मजदूरों की इतनी बड़ी यूनियन के इतने बड़े लीडर साहब का क्या हाल है?
मेरी लीडरी में क्या रखा है सेठ जी? अगर आप चाहें तो 1 मिनट में ये लीडरी खत्म हो जाए। आप इन मजदूरों की जायज शिकायतें दूर कर दें तो सच में किसी लीडर की जरूरत नहीं।
ओहो, तुम दूसरों की मुसीबत मोल क्यों लेते हो? तुम अपने काम से काम रखो। तुम कोई महात्मा गांधी हो?
नहीं सेठ जी, ये पवित्र नाम इस तरह मत लीजिए। मेरे लिए ये सौभाग्य क्या कम है कि जिस धरती पर उनके चरण पड़े हैं उसी धरती पर मैं भी रहता हूँ, उसी हवा में मैं सांस लेता हूँ। मेरा और उनका रिश्ता सिर्फ इतना है सेठ जी कि उनके बताए हुए सच्चाई के असूलों पर चलने की मैं एक कमजोर सी कोशिश कर रहा हूँ। मैं आपके पांव पड़ता हूँ सेठ जी, इस गुस्से को छोड़ दीजिए आप और इन मजदूरों की आवाज सुनिए ताकि इनके अंधेरे जीवन में भी कुछ रोशनी आ सके।
ये तो सब कुछ ठीक है।
दोस्तों सलाम आदाब व्हाटएवर। लाइक जब मैंने शुरू किया था ये सीरीज करना बाय माई सेल्फ, तो मैंने सोचा था कि आई विल कवर interesting aspects of Indian election, and I had created a whole list. So initially we talked about Sukumar Sen, then we talked about who stood against Nehru in the first election, and then I had a few other things that I wanted to talk about. For example, the growing power of the Hindu right vote bank in India, how Radio Moscow supported the Communist Party for election campaigns, etc. etc. But मैं अभी realize कर रहा हूँ ना कि मेरा trust in this democratic process is kind of slowly withering out. And so kind of from the last episode and the episode before the last one, I started to pick on things that I feel define the state, India, and how it looks at us, how it defines itself, how it would treat its people, everything. And for this episode today, I wanted to go into a subject that is kind of much closer to me, given my background of, well, my caste, class, all of gender background. The subject is masculinity. And the thing is that in BJ Pod, we have often talked about the political masculinity that is displayed in the political rhetoric from Modi ji to all of his minions, as well as how that rhetoric has been honed and kind of developed through the medium of popular culture in cinema and television. So let's kind of jump into that and talk about a bit of that. So as India gets its independence, cinema is a medium that exists from before that. So the identity of an Indian in cinema exists before India becomes out of the British India. But if you look at the Indian male protagonist in cinema, you will see a very interesting trend through the time. So as I was recording this episode, I got this interesting news that on Netflix, Lapata Ladies has become more viewed compared to Animal, which does give some amount of hope, in terms of like our viewership. But then again, you kind of tend to think about like the percentage of our population that is watching Netflix, and at the end of the day, people paid money to watch Animal. And while people also paid money to watch Lapta Ladies on Netflix, that direct transaction probably did not happen. Going back in time, I'd like to start at our like the moment after independence, when essentially we had 3 big heroes, if I could call them: Dilip Kumar, Devanand, Raj Kapoor. Dilip Kumar, like one of the film that kind of has always kind of caught my attention from the standpoint of Dilip Kumar is Naya Daur.
तब तो उस लड़की की शादी एक ही हालत में हो सकती है, तुम ये यूनियन वगैरह तोड़ दो और अपना नोटिस वापस ले लो।
आप चाहते हैं कि मैं अपने स्वार्थ के लिए अपने उसूलों का खून कर दूं?
तुम्हें मंजूर है या नहीं? एक लफ्ज में जवाब चाहता हूँ। 2000 की जगह 5000 रुपए देने को तैयार हूँ। खुद शरीक होकर बड़े धूमधाम से शादी कराऊंगा। बोलो।
सेठ जी, मेरे भाई ने अपनी जिंदगी का बेहतरीन हिस्सा आपकी नौकरी में गुजारा। अगर आप उसके लिए इतना करते हैं तो ये इंसाफ की बात है। लेकिन अगर इसी बात का दबाव डालकर आप मुझे उन हजारों मजदूरों का साथ छोड़ देने पर मजबूर करते हैं तो ये इंसाफ की बात नहीं है, ये जुल्म है। बेइंसाफी है सेठ जी।
बेइंसाफी? किस बात की बेइंसाफी? मैंने क्या जुर्म किया? मिल का मालिक होना जुर्म है, या मिल के मजदूरों को हर महीने पूरी तनख्वाह देता हूँ ये जुर्म है, या जिन लोगों को आधे वक्त खाना नहीं मिलता है उनको नौकरी देता हूँ ये भी जुर्म है?
नहीं, ये जुर्म नहीं है। नौकरी देना जुर्म नहीं है, मिल का मालिक होना भी जुर्म नहीं है। मैं तो सिर्फ इतना कहता हूँ सेठ जी कि जो धन मजदूरों के हिस्से का है उसे मजदूरों से छीन लेना जुर्म है।
कौन सा धन? क्या उन लोगों ने इस मिल में रुपया लगाया है?
उन्होंने रुपया लगाया नहीं सेठ जी, उन्होंने रुपया लगाया नहीं, रुपया पैदा किया। और आपने जो एक छप्पर खड़ा किया था उसे इन आलीशान मकानों में बदलने के लिए भी उन्हीं मजदूरों ने अपना खून और पसीना एक किया। आपकी ये सोना उगलने वाली मिलें भी उनकी मेहनत पर चलती हैं, और आप भी दुनिया में किसी और चीज से नहीं, मेहनत से ही कामयाब हुए हैं। लेकिन सेठ जी, रुपए ने शायद आपकी आंखों पर पर्दा डाल दिया, और जिस सीढ़ी पर चढ़ के आप जिंदगी में ऊपर उठे, आज आप उसी सीढ़ी को काट के फेंक देना चाहते हैं। रुपया क्या है सेठ जी? रुपया क्या है? मिट्टी की तरह एक बेजान और बेकार चीज है। लेकिन जिस तरह मिट्टी में मेहनत का बीज बोए बगैर पैदावार नहीं हो सकती, उसी तरह रुपए के साथ जब तक मेहनत का मेल नहीं होगा, दुनिया में कभी कोई तरक्की नहीं होगी। इन दोनों का मेल बहुत जरूरी है सेठ जी, इन दोनों का मेल बहुत जरूरी है। और नहीं तो ये भी सुन लीजिए आप कि जिस तरह और जिस धन के लिए आप दुनिया से धोखा कर रहे हैं, अपने अजीजों से, अपने दोस्तों से धोखा कर रहे हैं, अपने साथियों से धोखा कर रहे हैं, उसी धन के हाथों आप खुद भी धोखा खाएंगे।
मैं ये सब कुछ सुनने के लिए तैयार नहीं। मेरी बात का सीधी तरह जवाब दो, तुम ये यूनियन छोड़ने को तैयार हो या नहीं?
मेरे छोड़ देने से ये यूनियन नहीं टूटेगी सेठ जी। एक रतन चला जाएगा तो 1000 रतन इस यूनियन को चलाने के लिए आ जाएंगे।
एक दफा फिर सोच लो रे।
मैं सोच चुका हूं सेठ जी। मेरे साथियों ने जो भरोसा मुझ पर रखा है, मैं उस भरोसे से गद्दारी नहीं कर सकता सेठ।
And similarly, when it comes to like Raj Kapoor or also Devanand, one of the constant themes in the film that they are the protagonist is their emotional conflict and emotional intelligence and their ability to evoke emotions for them from the viewers through that medium essentially.
बता दूं? भरी बज़्म में राज की बात कह दूं? हाँ हाँ कह दो, ये सब लोग हमारे साथ ही हैं। तो सुनिए, बड़ा झूठ इसलिए कि आजकल छोटा झूठ और खोटा पैसा चलता ही नहीं। ये बड़े झूठ का जमाना है साहब। जो लोग पब्लिक से बड़ा झूठ बोलते हैं वो नेता और लीडर कहलाते हैं। व्यापार की दुनिया में जितना बड़ा झूठ तिजोरी में उतना ही ज्यादा रुपया। मैं तो इस बड़े झूठ के मैदान का एक बहुत छोटा सा खिलाड़ी हूं साहब।
बेवकूफ, तुमने ये नहीं सोचा कि इतना बड़ा झूठ बोलकर तुम अपनी जान को खतरे में डाल रहे हो।
शेर तुम्हें कच्चा चबा जाते, क्या तुम्हें इसका भी डर नहीं लगा? डर तो था शेर सिंह जी, मगर दुनिया में एक चीज शेर बबर से भी ज्यादा खतरनाक और डरावनी है, और वो है गरीबी और भूख। मुझे किसी भी कीमत पर पैसा चाहिए था, अपना और अपनी मां का पेट भरने के लिए, अपनी बीमार मां का इलाज कराने के लिए। कई वर्षों से शहर दर शहर भटक रहा हूं। मेरी मां कितने ही दिनों से बीमार है जी। डॉक्टर को फीस देने के लिए भी मेरे पास पैसे नहीं थे, कोई नौकरी देने के लिए तैयार नहीं। सब यही कहते थे, हंसना हंसाना भी कोई काम है, जोकर बनना है तो सर्कस में जाओ। पर सच बात तो यह है साहब, सच के लिए सर्कस के दरवाजे भी बंद थे, सो अंदर आने के लिए इतना बड़ा झूठ बोलना पड़ा।
तो चाहे आप राज कपूर का श्री 420 का कैरेक्टर देख लें, या नया दौर की बात करें, या you can start with Devanand's Bazi to a lot of his films through the 50s. Our hero essentially was a very Nehruvian hero. The greatest example is obviously Naya Daur, and his power lied in this almost this notion of self-denial, right? Where you would see through the time that he will be part of the class that is the majority of India, the working class, the union leader, the construction individual, and a very degree of those kind of work. Now, not to say that ये लोग इन लोगों ने फिल्म में कभी डॉक्टर या इंजीनियर का रोल नहीं, but even then, or rich kids, they have played those roles, but the leitmotif of their persona through cinema, if you think about when I think about Dilip Kumar, I think about like two moments. One is the song Ude Jab Jab Zulfe Teri, and you can see what he's wearing, and the other would be Dil Tadap Tadap Ke Keh Raha Hai, where he's arguably like playing the role of a more educated and more like higher paying job role. But the idea of masculinity through the 50s was in this self-denial, in this conflict of our hero, and then in the end, these guys fighting for not just themselves, but the people that are around them.
निकलो स्वामी पूर्णमिदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमेवाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। जरा इस श्लोक का अर्थ तो करके बतलाओ। क्यों नहीं समझे? अरे समझेगा कैसे? संस्कृत आती हो तब ना। क्या बात? Don't laugh like two big fools. You're a couple of crackpots, and for generations you've been fooling these innocent people. And it's about time you put a stop to this.
नहीं समझे पंडित जी? आप शास्त्री जी? नहीं। कैसे समझे? अंग्रेजी आती हो तब ना।
In some movies, which are out and out romantic movies, the idea that they deserve the woman they love is shown through some sort of hardship that they undergo. And this theme continues in our cinema to, I'd say, to today. The way the nature has changed, but from there, you move to the time of Rajesh Khanna and Amitabh Bachchan. This is the post-Nehruvian era of Indian cinema, and Amitabh Bachchan is a classic example of the angry young man coming in. But even the angry young man was not like he was fighting, and he was, one man with 20 other villain fighting, but he was still a union leader, Diwar. He was still like, and even if he made money and became rich, the idea of this person being rich was still evil. So the movies essentially were still talking of the have-nots instead of the haves. And then comes the 80s, which is a dark period for popular Hindi. We made some really, really awful movies. We also started developing a specific niche for like an urban audience, and the films like Masoom or Ijazat, Nasiruddin Shah and had a character who was more urban, clearly not from the have-nots, but his struggle, his personal conflict, also like was in kind of an emotional response, or his the conflict was still emotional. It is not a coincidence that our films start to change post-liberalization, and perhaps the greatest symbol of this is, and I'm sure some of you will be surprised, is actually a film from 1998, which is Pyar Kiya To Darna Hai, which stars Salman. First time you see a proper muscular hero dancing shirtless on your screens. We had the notion of like a hero with like more like power, the Amitabh Bachchan, with no muscles. He kind of exuded, his personality exuded power. And then later you had Sunny Deol and Sanjay Dutt, who had some muscles, but the point of their films was not muscles, and it was not even like so much in your face. Once Pyar Kiya To Darna Kya Hai, things move differently. So an interesting bit to kind of observe here is one of Salman's contemporary, Shah Rukh Ka Naam Hai, mostly also have these romantic hits through the 90s, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, where the conflict Shah Rukh has is to prove that he deserves this woman that he loves. He goes through like this whole ordeal of like convincing all of his family. Now, the movie has its own problems, and we have gone through it. We have done a whole episode on it, but he goes through his problems, and to prove that he's worthy of Kajol in the film, beyond that last fight scene, what he does is he basically goes on a campaign of kind of making sure that everybody likes him. In case of Salman Khan and Pyar Kiya To Darna Kya, he has played a similar role in all of his films before. Like Maine Pyar Kiya, he plays a similar kind of role. But what changes in Pyar Kiya To Darna is this guy will show that the same Kajol actually, that he deserves Kajol by doing like physical hard labor. So like even in Maine Pyar Kiya, he does that, where he goes back, like it's like the urban guy going back to the village and proving that he can do physical hardship, and that's how he deserves the woman. It's the first time that you see that an appeal to masculinity of a man is kind of covered in this desire for this man to aspire to the woman. To think of this, the other angle that I kind of often think is that clearly Salman is not as good of an actor compared to, say, a Shah Rukh, and perhaps his power, at some point subconsciously at least, they realize that if we rely on Salman Khan to emotionally convince the audience that he deserves this happy ending, it will be tough because he does not have that acting ability, that probably Shah Rukh has, or in the past your Devanands and Dilip Kumars had. So it is better to show him do physical toil to kind of convince us that he deserves this individual that he's in love with. Acha, on that side note, like I'm not talking about the women in our cinema because our cinema does not. I really appreciate films like Lapata Ladies or Queen or even a Kahani, but I mean, I hope all of you agree that the story of Hindi cinema, at least, has been the story of Hindi speaking and their quest for heroism, right? So anyway, so going back to Salman, and then what happens after Salman is there's a bunch of actors and a bunch of movies that come out after it, starting from Kaho Na Pyar and other, where the actor is hyper masculine, very clearly like muscular. There are no chest hair. The chest hairs are gone after this. After like Salman comes out bare chested. So if you, I mean, notice before like this, he had like a full chesty body, but now that is all gone. So because you have to show this clean nature of masculinity. But anyway, and you see a lot of these actors come in now. Akshay, Sunil, these guys who have existed before, they also start coming in with a more masculine tone. They also start cleaning up the chest. They also start showing how their masculinity is the point of them being a hero. Also goes to like all of these actors, from your Salman Khan to the bottom of the barrel, Uday Chopra. They're not good actors. So to compensate, I think sometimes masculinity or muscular, like the point of their muscular structure is kind of needed. So this keeps happening, and then and again, I talked about Pyar Ke To Darna Ke, which is 1998, which is also the period that BJP first kind of takes on this single largest party avatar in Indian politics. There is strong, and as we will go through this episode, we will see there are some very strong connections between Hindutva feelings and masculine anxieties of our men. So 2000s, and then I want to come to the more recent period that we are living. So there are films like RRR, which is not a Hindi film, but it is, for all intents and purposes, is a national film. And then from RRR to Animal, and then there are a bunch of like war films that portray the message of the current regime about Ghar Mein Ghus Ke Maar through very masculine example. So in RRR, for example, you see the actors, the whole story of Indian freedom struggle has been kind of re-envisioned in this idea that if we had access to, if we were just more masculine, we would beat the shit out of these British folks. Like the story is literally like a village gets weapons and takes on the Brits, and while it's a decently made, like in terms of like cinematic element, the point is that the message is very like, if you sit in 2020 and if you look at the India around you and then you think how India could have been if this was the case forever, then RRR happened. And this happens in the same time, like I don't know if you guys remember, but the year, like that year when RRR became RRR 2 years ago, उस साल जब मोदी जी का बर्थडे हुआ तो मोदी जी ने अपने बर्थडे में क्या किया था, आप लोग को याद है? उन्होंने नामीबिया से चीते बुलवा के वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरी में चीते छोड़े थे. Like there cannot be a better example of these masculine signaling that happened both in our cinema and in how our leader reacted. And if you look at it, like the other thing about RRR, which also kind of really adds to this whole messaging, is that last song where they go through the list of freedom fighters and there is no gun. Because, well, do I need to tell you what? So since then, I have been pulled back into the memory of the pre-2014 Modi, the 56-inch and other masculine tropes that exist around us now, which did not exist before, like that image of angry Hanuman. The thing that, like, he's actually, it's very interesting because this cheetah thing that I'm talking about, he has a thing, like, because when he was a chief minister of Gujarat, he tried to do the same thing. He tried to release cheetahs, like something about him releasing cheetahs is very, like, he has this thing. And then constantly, if you call him Chowkidar, he called himself Chowkidar, protector, which is, right? 56-inch, he does not have 56-inch, but like somehow we are all like ready to believe that he is 56. And then you will see our journalists wearing camouflage suits in the newsroom to describe like the events like घर में घुस के मार, or even Modi ji wearing like army fatigue when he goes on to meet army. I mean, there is clearly like अगर एक न्यूट्रल पर्सपेक्टिव से मैं बोलूं तो the thought that comes to my mind is what are you trying to compensate for? Is there some kami that you feel that you are trying to compensate for? So this chess size to calling him chowkidar to he at one point he called Congress a majboor maa bete ki sarkar. Our political language along with our cinema has been mired in this masculine patriarchal over display of masculinity, as I said, more often than not is trying to compensate for something. Perhaps in the 90s cinema, it was trying to compensate for the limited ability of the actors. Of course, with like a post-liberalized India that had more access to cinema from abroad, to compete with that cinema, you had to cover yourself in similar capitalistic, overtones, and one of that is this macho hero. That it's so funny. If you go back and look at our like Raj Kapoor, Sri Charsubis, like he almost feels a little effeminate, and the woman is still in love with him. Clearly, watchers, fans still liked him as a hero, but if you look at his body and the way he moves, it's very effeminate. Or there is this Bengali movie, there is this massive Bengali star, Uttam Kumar, and there is this movie Deya Neya that he did, and there's this song I really love. That song, it's a nice Bengali song. It's called Ami Cheche Dekhe Sharadin, as in I look out every day. Whatever, that's not the point. The point is, if you watch that song, you cannot help but notice how soft and effeminate our actors used to be back in the day. And at this point in time, if that actor were to don the role of a hero, like it would just not pass. We will probably like not accept that. So something massively shifted between the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I do not completely want to put it all on liberalization and anti-capitalist, but you cannot deny that there has been an effect on the muscles of our hero because of that. And you cannot also deny that the true power that the Hindutva forces gained in India finally happened right around the time of liberalization. A few things happened. Mandal Commission was announced, and within a month, we don't often talk about it. And see, this is what happened. Right? There's so much kind of linkages in our system. So the August was when Mandal was announced, and September, so right a month after, was when Advani started his Rath Yatra. So you can see these links between the embedded masculinity of the Hindu, usually the upper caste Hindu man, and how it is reflected in our polity and our cinema. It is only in the 90s when our heroes become rich, and initially they are just rich for being rich. So, right, post liberalization, you start seeing a lot of foreign locales in our cinema, and it's par for the course. Now you like a part of our population has more access to foreign travel, so you have to show that in your cinema. But since then, now like if you look at a movie like Animal, our hero is proud of the material conquests that he can have, which is complete antithesis to like the Dilip Kumar of the 50s, where the idea of this material prosperity was the evil.
Who is the main guy?
Freddy.
आपने फोन पे हमारे इंजीनियर से बात किया था? What a vision. क्या थॉट है? पागल हो गया हमारा टीम. ओके, डायरेक्ट पॉइंट पे आते हैं. These are no saints. इनके आगे पीछे कोई नहीं. Clean, loaded, no record.
बाकी सब छड्डो बाजी, डेमो दो इसकी.
कंधे पे हाथ नहीं रखने का. कंधे पे हाथ नहीं रखने का. मैं ऐसा पर्सनल डिलीवरी करने नहीं आता कभी. मैं आया स्पेशली उस आदमी के लिए जिसने हमारे टीम को ब्रीफ दिया था ये मशीन के बारे में.
फ्रेडी, प्लीज कंटिन्यू.
तेरे बंदे मेरे को स्विगी वाला समझते हैं, और इसका आदमी है मैं. जब भी एक्शन की सूचना मिलेगी, सबसे पहले द फर्स्ट थिंग, गोटी टाइट रखने का. टाइट सपोर्टर या अंडरवेयर नहीं पहना तो ढोल बन जाएगा ढोल. एक्शन अगर ऐसा इंडोर में होता है तो हेडफोन्स कंपलसरी. पगड़ी वाले के लिए ईयरबड्स है. ओके, गुड. नाउ कमिंग टू दिस. Move!
रेडी अंडरवेयर दे। तेरा अंडरवेयर दे।
क्या?
मैंने अंदर कुछ नहीं पहना है, मुझे जाना है। डू यू अंडरस्टैंड? दिखाऊं?
कैरी कैरी कहेगा, मैं नहीं कहूँ। ब्लैक।
If you look at the Hindutva psyche, the constant complaint that you will receive from the folks is that Muslims, the Muslim kind of kings and the invaders from outside came in and attacked us and kept us enslaved or ruled over us or what, and then the British did the same. And now the Muslims bear the brunt of your masculine aggressiveness simply because of Indian minority is Muslim. Muslims are the most powerless group in India, and they're like, and essentially, you, if you're a bully, you bully the weak. You cannot bully the Gora, for sure. So who do you bully? You bully who is weaker than you. I wrote a piece in News Laundry some years ago about the myth of the marauding Muslim, basically showing how this concept that Muslims invaded and broke our temples and killed and enslaved people is something that did happen, but it is not like Hindu kings were not doing this to the other Hindu kings. It was essentially pre-Westphalian democracy moment where everyone was trying, like, we were all savages. We still are savages, but maybe we were more savages then, and we were showing our savagery. I mean, what is like the concept of Johar, where a woman gives herself because she, much like a property, cannot be. It is all savage. The Muslims invading, enslaving is savage, but how much of it was because they were Muslim kings, and how much of it is because they were just kings, is something that is a complexity that we do not want to get in. If you read that piece, I have literally like listed examples of where Buddhist kings and Hindu kings were doing it to each other and to themselves within the same religious group. And the thing is that who was fighting for the Mughals? Man Singh was fighting for Mughals, and who did who did Babur beat when he came to, like, when Mughals ने हम पे राज किया? Mughals ने आके हराया किसको? लोधीस को, right? वो क्या थे? वो भी मुस्लिम थे. The point is that now in hindsight, now in your post-partition, this democratic quote unquote India, when you look at this, it's easy to kind of paint all of these things in this color, but how much of it is exact truth and how much of it is something that is created to assuage your aggrieved masculinity is something that I kind of between that, I will say Robert O. Paxton is an American historian who identified forces that drive fascism. His research points to an underlying feeling of crisis and humiliation, the belief that one's group has been victimized, the need for authoritarian leadership, and the legitimation of the use of force and order for one's own group to dominate others. Similarly, Rob Weiler, Christabel Rogan, Bridget Conlon, and Michael Wojnarowski, pronunciation पे मत जाना दोस्तों, in their paper Overdoing Gender, a test of the masculine overcompensation thesis, demonstrate that when their masculinity is threatened, men react with extreme demonstrations of aggressiveness. In one of their tests, when men were told that they had feminine traits, they would then show more support for war, homophobic attitudes, and even interest in purchasing an SUV. As Mussolini once said in the Italian parliament, war is to men what maternity is to women. All narratives that are tied around masculinity will have their root in some kind of real or imagined humiliation and sense of inferiority. There is a great podcast which is called As Seen on Radio. I think it's their season 3 where they talk about men, and one of the episodes is called Warriors. And in that episode, they describe how in the pre-agricultural society, men, and like we call men as hunters and the women as keepers. But the fact is, in a 24-hour day, how many hours do you spend in hunting, and what kind of hunting are you doing? What they kind of show is that in the pre-agricultural society, men and women were basically equals doing equal jobs, but as then we moved to more agricultural society, men took on a bigger role. And in fact, if you listen to that episode, they kind of talk about how the whole religious notion and the priesthood and all of these people, be the priest and the prophet and all of them being men, kind of happens because that was the way to kind of hold women from coming into the public square and keeping them at home. And Freud talks about the penis envy. This episode they talk about the womb envy and how most men probably envy women for their ability to carry and birth life. And I don't say this enough. I'm agreeing with Mussolini. Maybe war is for men what maternity is for women. So in pre-British India, if you look at the Battle of Haldi Ghati, it was fought between Man Singh, who was representing Akbar, against Maharana Pratap. Chhatrapati Shivaji had Noor Beg and Darya Sarang as his commander while fighting Afzal Khan and Aurangzeb. This is to say that masculinity in the military sense seems to be distributed normally across religious lines, and that is what I'm trying to say, that today you hear about Shivaji or Maharana Pratap and you think of them as Hindu heroes. We don't talk about who was fighting for them. So this British policy as a reaction, so this is my theory, this is kind of the theory that I have been building on, is when the revolt of 1857 happens, the British policy seems to change toward India, and it changes in a very specific way. So in 1857, Indian troops, particularly the Bengalis, mutinied against the British army, but Sikhs, broadly Punjabis, Dogras, Gorkhas, Garhwalis, and Pakhtuns, the Pathans, they did not join the mutiny and fought on the side of East India Company. The mutiny, if you recall the history, happens in what is the modern UP and Bengal. So Mangal Pandey is a big name. These people fought against the British, but many other groups were part of the East India Army. So once the British get back the reins after 1857, what they do is they start designating groups within India as martial and non-martial races. The doctrine of martial races postulates that abilities of soldiers are inherited, and most Indians, with the exception of their races actually that supported them in 1857, do not have the genes to make them warriors. The British described these races as naturally warlike and aggressive in battle, and to possess qualities like loyalty, physical strength, fighting tenacity, and military tactics. Just hold on, I'm building to something, don't worry. Brits then discouraged enlistment of feeble Bengalis, upper caste Hindus from North India and UP, who had sided with the rebel army during the war. Parallels between group loyalties to the British in 1857 and those who were designated martial races are very hard to escape. And in fact, prior to 1857, the presidency troops of the East India Company were mixed races. So how this martial and non-martial race has an effect on the Indian psyche, that's the next thing that I want to get into. So the groups that were designated as martial carried that badge with pride, and the other side took upon the hurt and humiliation. Linguist Sunit Kumar Chatterjee talks of Bengali sense of inferiority complex as early as the 1870s. In 1879, Rajnarayan Bose publishes his book called Hindu Dharma Shreshtota. Then Chandranath Bose, his book is literally called Hindutva, which was published in 1892. This was the first recorded use of the word Hindutva. The Calcutta Review reviewed the book, describing the book as evidently a work of Hindu revival. Then came Anand Math, the big. Ahmad Sofa, a Bengali historian, credits Bankim Chandra Chatterjee as the first to dream of a Hindu Rashtra. Then in 1909, UN Mukherjee wrote multiple letters to Bengalis in English language paper from Calcutta titled Hindus, a Dying Race in 1909. These letters were edited by S.N. Banerjee, the two-term Congress president, Suriname. These letters composed of litanies about the growing Muslim population in Bengal, which would eventually eat up all the Hindus. These letters composed, the other thing that he wrote about was his fondness for Swami Shraddhananda. Swami Shraddhananda is the founding leader of Hindu Mahasabha. They met in Calcutta, and many years later, in 1979, Hindu Mahasabha published a booklet by the name Hindus, a Dying Race, 70 years after it was published the first time. And now it covered all of the nation of India instead of just Bengal. Bengal of the early 20th century birthed the Hindu anxieties in this form of Hindu. The Bengali Hindu Mahasabha leader Shyama Prasad Mukherjee was the founder of Bharatiya Jansangh. It was in 1910 when a young medical student from Nagpur started at the Calcutta Medical College. He met members of Anushilan Samiti and after graduation went back to his hometown, and within a decade, Dr. Keshav Baliram Hedgewar was disillusioned enough from Congress to leave it and start his own organization called the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. In United Province, UP, another place where the 1857 revolt had a high impact, saw changes in attitude and anxiety around masculine. Charu Gupta illustrates in her Sexuality, Obscenity, Community, Women, Muslims, and the Hindu Public in Colonial India how militant Hindu organizations in the 1920s constructed a masculine image as a psychological defense to the image of powerful, rational British and the lustful Muslim. Hindu masculinity had to be built in opposition to the other. Gupta writes, referring to the Muslims over the others, the Hindutva camp strategy was, according to her, to glorify a Hindu male who managed to attract the love of a Muslim woman as the ultimate hero. He did not abduct. He was irresistibly attractive. There was a novel written in the 1920s called Shivaji Va Roshanara, which reimagines, much like RRR reimagines the freedom struggle, it reimagines how Roshanara, who's Aurangzeb's daughter, fell in love with Shivaji and left all of his father's massive Mughal empire to live with Shivaji. So you see how kind of things are. In the 1920s, in the United Province, there are various, this is again from Charu Gupta's book, leaflets being shared about how the Muslim man will abduct your Hindu woman and So post-independence, Indian army comprised of 50% Punjabis, when the population of Punjab as proportion to India was 5%. Per Stephen I. Wilkinson's extraordinary book, Army and Nation, since then, Free India maintained colonial style of recruiting. In fact, by the 70s, India doubled the number of martial class units within it, Indian Army that is. Punjab Regiment increased from 5 to 29 battalions. Rajputana Rifles, mainly Jats and Rajputs, went from 6 to 21 battalions in the same period. On the other side, in Pakistan, Aqil Shah, in his outstanding book, The Army and Democracy, illustrate the effect on Pakistan. By 1955, Marshal Punjabi dominated West Pakistanis. Out of the total officers in the Pakistani army, 894 were Punjabi and only 14 were from the non-martial East Pakistan. Therefore, it is not a surprise that from Bengal to UP to Maharashtra and Gujarat, groups that were initially tagged as non-martial seem to have reacted to this indictment in the only way a people who see themselves as humiliated do, by conceptualizing this grand idea of a Hindu Rashtra and Hindutva, originating in Bengal and then borrowed elsewhere. And the decade preceding partition meant that these groups saw as its enemy in not just the colonial West, but mainly in their most immediate other, that is, the Punjabi and Pathan, who was the Muslim of Pakistan, the martial race. While sharing a somewhat less antagonistic relationship with the Bengali Muslim in the East Pakistan and eventually Bangladesh. And you still see that, partition happened on both sides. Technically, as much as Pakistani Muslim is the quote-unquote betrayer of the idea of India, so is the Bengali Muslims in Bangladesh. But our relationship dynamics are very different. And if you start looking at these things from the lens of what I just talked about, you start to see why certain things are, the way they are. Even an average Pakistani, even today, looks at the Hindu India from the lens of non-martial prototype Banya stereotype. In fact, it is a common saying, which a lot of Pakistanis believe, is that inherently the Indian man is weaker, and they say that 4 Indian men equal 1 Pakistani man, and this masculine narrative has harmed them as much as it is harmed the modern India. But that is for some other day. So Nathuram Godse, in his own words, saw Gandhi as an effeminate father. He saw him as Natraj. And Nathuram, going into his story, Nathuram was called Nathuram because when he was born, he was born after a number of siblings. His parents wanted a girl and he was born a boy. So for the first few years of his life, they brought him up as a girl. And the Nathu is the nut that they had on his nose or something. And because of that, his name Nathu became Nathu. So interestingly, you see how his anxieties and anger also he transported. Gandhi. Hedgewar styled RSS on Mussolini's black shirts with the shorts and the same genocidal desires. It seems the divide created by the martial race idea still exists in the subconscious psychology fueling the Hindutva anxiety and thereby the worldview that the Hindutva folks carry. Going back to the notion of masculinity, recently Manmohan Singh retired from, and I have been going back and forth about this idea of masculinity, how it is reflected in our collective conscience. Modi ji is masculine, the Congress is not. Now, if you look at Rahul Gandhi, you will have to say that he seems a far more masculine man, however you want to define it. But the way the propaganda kind of converts him into a pappu, makes him a baby. So he's not a man. He's a baby. So you cannot see masculine abilities in a baby. Kejriwal is weak, lean, always cuffs. His stereotype is that he always cuffs, and so therefore he is, again, you cannot see the masculinity in him. The interesting bit is if like someone like a Nehru, who again was not just like lean, good-looking fellow, but also evidently had liaison with white women, which, hey, no judgment here. But the way he's stereotyped is as a lustful man, and there are literally there are people who believe that he was a Muslim. So he's very easily put into that bracket. So again, his masculinity does not in any way compete with the masculinity of our one dream leader. And now this has been, they are taking it to like a very different level, where they are like making like a god avatar of this guy. He himself probably has started to believe in it. This is like, because the thing is, the masculine notion of being victim will not stop at some point. There's no line after which they're like, हाँ कि अब हमने proper बदला ले लिया तो हो गया. So they will keep upping the ante, and I do not know where kind of it ends. The cult is so strong that as long as the cult leader seems to hold on, the cult will hold on. And these cults, be it the cult of Mussolini or Hitler, they do not end well for the followers of the cult, you know. But going back to the idea of masculinity, it is important because, see, men and boys grow up with the notion that they have to contribute to the society. For the longest time, we have created armed forces, and armed forces that across all countries that only for the longest time have only hired from men, and we have made war as one of those noble pursuits that a man can get into and fight to save his people, his nation, that broad identity that he supports. And to kind of make sure that we have constant supply of men for wars, we have propagandized war into this noble pursuit where we fight for our country against that other, against that enemy. When if you sit back and think, a truly civilized world where we have this one earth, we do not know about life anywhere else, and we are still using things like a nuclear bomb against each other in this world. It is like probably 500 or 1,000 years down the line when someone will look at our time and think of us as like such primitive savages for indulging in these. And these men, these young men, like if you look at, like, there are several documentaries that have been released. In India, we do really bad with like the war and the PTSD that it leaves people with. We somehow, like, much like everything else, we just ignore it. But in the West, they have, like, look at the Thin Red Line or the recent documentary They Shall Not Die. In the 1917 World War I documentary, you see these are young boys, and they are put into the line of fire. Remember, I always try to remind my friend that there is a reason that the military cantonments have such easy access to liquor. There is a reason that during the World Wars, these army men in the Western armies got rum rations. Because it is not easy to just go and fight war, no matter how much you, make it like what men stand for. You are afraid when you are facing an inevitable death. And so that is why you have to, like, use things like a drug, like alcohol, to kind of pump yourself up to do that. We are going back to the idea of cinema. Our heroes were more thoughtful, they were more emotionally available, and so were our leaders. And as our world changed and our leaders have become less and less emotionally available and less thoughtful, the hero in our cinema is also reflecting the same attitude. There is a clear line between the last 10 years movie like Animal. There is Meghna Desai, when he wrote the obituary of Dilip Kumar, he called him Nehru's hero, and there is nothing that could be more accurate than that. And our heroes, it was not just about their emotive ability. I mean, it was not just about the beautifulness. We've had really beautiful heroes, like from your early Dilip Kumar and Devanand to Vinod. They were beautiful. We also had actors like Sanjeev Kumar and Pradeep Kumar who portrayed heroes in a very non-threatening way, and that too was, a kind of masculinity that was expressed in our cinema. It is, as I said, not a coincidence that we cannot imagine a man like Sanjeev Kumar ever portraying the hero's role in our cinema ever again. So this is thinking from that way. I have been thinking about what could be our idea of masculinity and masculinity, positive masculinity, beyond this wounded masculinity in our society. And my mind takes me back all the time to this man who was born in pre-partition India in a city that is barely 60 miles from the modern day Islamabad. His mother passed away when he was very young, a few months old. He grew up with his grandparents, and all of his family was torn apart in partition. His father was a dry fruit seller, nothing more. After partition, he moved to Amritsar, and from Amritsar he went to Chandigarh, and from Chandigarh he went to Oxford and Cambridge. Then became the governor of the Reserve Bank of India, eventually the finance minister and the prime minister of our country. This man, Manmohan Singh, is not seen as a masculine ideal. Whereas, if you think about his life, his struggles, his poverty, and the ultimate achievements that he has had in life, could there be a better ideal for us to look up to?
I honestly believe that history will be kinder to me than the contemporary media or or for that matter the opposition parties in parliament.
He comes from that same poverty, never victimizes himself, never does he talk about the challenges that he has had. Now, we can debate if that is a good or a bad thing. Should he have done that? But the point is, his achievements talk for himself. And then there is another man, still pretty much active in our politics, who also grew up in the British India and lost all of his family in communal riots. His mother and the rest of the family burnt alive. Left with only his father, he grows up, gets his law degree, and decides to fight for the same people that he saw growing up. Does not let the anger and the fire of the communal riots change him as a person. And that person is Mallikarjun Kharge.
मेरा दुर्दैव है क्योंकि मैं अपने माँ को देख नहीं सका, मेरे बहन को देख नहीं सका, मेरे भाई को देख नहीं सका, मेरे चाचा को देख नहीं सका, क्योंकि मेरा घर उस वक्त जल गया जिस वक्त वहाँ हैदराबाद लिबरेशन में ये दंगे चल रहे थे। उस दंगे में मेरा पूरा घर चले और मैं एक ही घर में बचा, मैं और मेरे पिताजी, वो दोनों बचे। मैं ये 1946 की बात कर रहा हूँ, क्योंकि वहाँ पर 46, 47, 48 में दंगे हुए, तो सिर्फ हमारे पिताजी ने मुझे बचा के संरक्षण करके गांव-गांव लेके गए, फिर आखिरी में गुलबर्गा में हम आके बसे। तो मुझे तो मैं देखा नहीं मेरी बहन कैसी थी, मेरी माँ कैसी थी, लेकिन आप लोग बड़े खुश नसीब हो, आपके पास माँ है, आपके पास बहन है, आपके पास भाई है, आपके पास पिता है, सभी लोग हैं। लेकिन हमने वो जो आशीर्वाद से दूर हो गए, लेकिन लोगों ने आशीर्वाद दिया।
And yet he is not our ideal. And yet he is not the masculine example that we want our boys to learn from or understand or know. And yet somehow we have made Modi and Yogi's our hero. And I just want to say that it goes without saying, all of you understand it, that a culture of hyper masculinity enables politics of authoritarianism. It is like a snake devouring her tail, and nowhere in human history has masculine authoritarianism has led to prosperity or economic growth. But it has definitely not led to a content and confident society. Victimhood needs more victimhood, and it is an endless cycle. I wish for us to have the ability to make more men like Manmohan Singh.
राहुल ने सर जो ये अमीरी गरीबी की बात की,
कौन राहुल?
हमारे वाले राहुल।
तो वो आपके वाले नहीं है।
लेकिन मैं दूसरे वाले राहुल की भी बात करता हूँ। जो आरोप दूसरे वाले राहुल लगा रहे हैं आपके ऊपर, वो है कि आपकी बड़े बड़े उद्योगपतियों से दोस्ती है। 5 साल से आपकी छवि पर एक स्टिकर चिपकाने की कोशिश की जा रही है, और वो स्टिकर है कि अडानी अंबानी के साथ दोस्ती। इस पर आप कैसे, और ये बिल्कुल ब्लैक और व्हाइट की तरह है कि आप कहाँ काम
आप
कहाँ कर
देखिए,
रहे हैं।
इस परिवार का प्रॉब्लम ये है कि ये बोझ में दबा हुआ परिवार है। नेहरू जी को गालियां पड़ती थी, बिरला टाटा की सरकार, बिरला टाटा की सरकार। पार्लियामेंट में देख लेंगे तो टाटा बिरला सरकार, टाटा बिरला सरकार, ये नेहरू जी लगातार सुनते आए थे। अब इस परिवार के प्रॉब्लम ये है, जो गाली मेरे नाना को पड़ी वो मोदी को पड़नी चाहिए। तो वो सब चीज़, वो राफेल क्यों लाए? मुद्दा राफेल नहीं था, उनको लगता था राफेल करूंगा तो बोफोर्स का पाप धोएगा, तो इसलिए वो लाए। साइकोलॉजिकल प्रॉब्लम है। इस चुनाव में वो इतना जोर, इतनी मेहनत पहले कभी नहीं की, क्यों कर रहे हैं? उनको लगता है अगर मोदी तीसरी बार हो गया तो मेरे पिताजी की कोई इज्जत नहीं रहेगी, मेरी नानी की इज्जत, दादी की इज्जत नहीं रहेगी, ये तो नेहरू के बराबर हो जाएगा। वो हर चीज़ उसी से कंपैरिजन करते हैं, और इसलिए गालियाँ ये सब उन्होंने कहीं से उधारी ली हुई गालियाँ हैं। अब दूसरा बात है, मैं लाल किले पर से बोलता हूँ जी, मैं शर्माता नहीं हूँ, मैं लाल किले से बोलता हूँ। इस देश में वेल्थ क्रिएटर्स की इज्जत होनी चाहिए। मेरे देश में जो सक्षम लोग हैं, जो सामर्थ्यवान लोग हैं, इनकी प्रतिष्ठा बढ़नी चाहिए। लेकिन मैं मेरे देश में वेल्थ क्रिएटर की इज्जत करूंगा, मेरे देश के उज्जवल भविष्य के लिए।
प्रधानमंत्री जी, हाल ही में अंतर्राष्ट्रीय अर्थशास्त्रियों की एक रिपोर्ट आई टॉमस पिकेटी की, जिसमें उन्होंने कहा कि भारत में इनकम इनइक्वालिटी बढ़ रही है, यानी कि जो लोग अमीर हैं वो और अमीर होते जा रहे हैं, जो गरीब हैं वो और गरीब होते जा रहे हैं, कि भारत की इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ इस वक्त के शेप्ड है, कि ऊपर लोग अमीर हो रहे हैं और नीचे लोग गरीब हो रहे हैं। आप इसको कैसे देखते हैं, जो इनकम इनइक्वालिटी का विषय?
तो क्या सबके सब गरीब होने चाहिए?
अमीर ज़्यादा होने चाहिए।
सबके सब गरीब होने चाहिए? एक तो एक उपाय ये है कि भाई कोई डिफरेंस ही नहीं रहेगा, बिल्कुल सब तो माने भाई। इस देश में पहले ऐसा था।
He learnt and taught something else all his life. He was a socialist, and then when crisis came, he made a complete turnaround.
Well, let me say, I have been always a socialist in the sense that I regard a quest for equity, quest for social equality as fundamental to running a modern economy and modern society. If by socialism you mean a passion for equity, a passion for equality, I am a socialist even then. But I have never been a socialist in the sense, in the doctrinaire sense of the term, that all things must be done by the government.
So are you a socialist now or not?
I am a socialist in the sense that I worry about growing inequalities. I worry about the fact that millions of our children coming from poorer families are outside the school system, that millions of our families do not have access to safe drinking water.
साथी हाथ बढ़ाना, एक अकेला थक जाएगा, मिलकर बोझ उठाना। साथी हाथ बढ़ाना, साथी हाथ बढ़ाना, साथी रे, साथी हाथ बढ़ाना, साथी रे। किसी की मुस्कुराहटों पे हो निशान, किसी का दर्द मिल सके तो ले उधार, किसी के वास्ते हो तेरे दिल में प्यार, जीना इसी का नाम है।